Hey, good morning. Welcome to our 11 o'clock gathering here at the River Church. I am so excited to be able to preach God's word to you this morning as we dive in and see what he has for us. My name is Caleb Combs. Whether today is your first time logging on or you are a frequent flyer with us while gathering in the digital age of quarantine, I so appreciate you taking the time out to study God's word together. You'll find us in the middle of a series called Memoirs of Moses, and we will be jumping in just in a couple minutes to Exodus chapter 2 and Exodus chapter 3. But I wanted to talk specifically a little bit about quarantine, this time away. It's been so difficult. Strenuous. I sound smart when I say unprecedented, so I will say it. No, it's just been extremely difficult. Maybe for some of you, you're like, I was able to do this or that, but I love people. I want to be able to see you. I want to be able to greet you. I want to give you a hug. I want to hear about what's going on in your life and see your kids and hear all those different dynamics. But the time, really the 6 or 7 or 8, or I've lost count. Maybe you have an exact count, and that's cool, but I've just said it's been forever, and I'm good with that. It's just been an interesting and difficult time, but as we try to really work through all the different dynamics, maybe you've been like me and tried to tackle some projects or learn some things in this time of quarantine. My wife and I thought we would try to do a refurbish of some furniture. So we went to the hardware and bought all this stuff where it takes the paint off and you got to scrape it and you got to saran wrap and all the different dynamics of that maybe you're fantastic at, that I'm not very good at. But you'll find that piece of furniture half done in my garage. It was extremely difficult, but we did learn some things and we'll get it finished. It's looking pretty decent. My wife has picked up or learned some baking things. She has started to bake banana breads. My kids love it. It's got chocolate chips in it, banana chunks. They are all about it every day, asking mom, hey, can you make some banana bread? Can you do this? Can you do that? So we have learned some things. We've been really taught ourselves some things over the last really several weeks. In the middle of March, our schools or the government said, hey, we want you as parents to begin to educate your kids. At that moment, I knew I was in trouble, or more realistically, my kids were in trouble. I wouldn't say I was a terrible student. I just was not great in school. It was not the best thing that I could do. I went to school so then I could play sports. That was really the rationale in my mind, and I was okay with that. But in the middle of March, when they sent our kids home to now be educated, I'm thankful for a wife that is smart and did well in school, but for me it was not the best thing. Well, this week my son, who is in 5th grade, brings a new meaning to are you smarter than a 5th grader? Because I can adequately say in a lot of ways no, but don't tell him that. He brought a problem to me. He was working on some math. He said, Dad, can you help me? I wanted to be a dad that can say, yeah, I can do anything, which realistically we all know that's not true. And he brought me a math problem that he was working on. Dad, I need your help. I need to figure out how to multiply and divide mixed numbers, a number and a fraction, and then multiply it by another whole number and fraction. Yeah, I didn't know how to do that. Maybe you do, and you're super smart, and you can brag about it. Cool, that's awesome. So I said, well, let's figure it out. I'm so thankful for YouTube. We watched several tutorials on how to do that, and thankful for friends who are engineers. I have a good buddy who's a math whiz, and so we have FaceTimed with him to help and be taught. And so I have learned how to multiply and divide mixed numbers. I'm not going to tell you how to do that this morning. You can figure it out or go, I can send you a link, but not going to spend the time talking about that. But I have learned something in this time away, this time separated really from everyone else. As I said earlier, we're in a series about Moses called Memoirs of Moses. And really we find Moses in, maybe a little liberty here, in a time of quarantine or separation or isolation, a place called the wilderness. This morning we will talk about, and I've titled this message, Lessons from the Wilderness. We pick up with Moses in the wilderness. I'm going to pray and then we'll jump into Exodus chapter 2 this morning. God, we come to you. We lift you up. We praise you. We honor you. God, speak through your word this morning. Speak in a mighty way. I believe you can do it. God, if somebody's watching live or maybe they're watching at another time, I ask that you really, through your word, explode in their lives so that they can truly understand your word. We love you. We praise you in Jesus' wonderful name. I pray, I preach, I proclaim this morning. Amen. Lessons from the wilderness. In Exodus chapter 2, we pick up with Moses, isolated in the wilderness by himself. He came from a miraculous birth where Pharaoh had made an edict to kill all of the children of the Hebrews, or all of the boys of the Hebrews. And Moses was protected by his mom and his dad and put in a little boat and stuck into the Nile. And God directed that boat, steered it to the shores of Pharaoh's daughter. And Moses, now a Hebrew, was raised in the house of Pharaoh. Felt a passion for the Hebrews, compassion for the Hebrews, but also was trained, as Acts 7, to be mighty in speech and in conduct. And now Moses was on a run. He had just tried to intervene and save and jump into the calling he thought to save the children of Israel, and he murdered an Egyptian. And now was a fugitive of the law, fugitive of his reputation, and found himself alone, giving up all of the power, the prestige, the safety, the food, everything that he had. He had given it all up. And now we find in Exodus 2, Moses seated at a well in the wilderness. Wilderness of Midian, the Bible says. The wilderness is a barren, tough place, a place with minimal water, minimal resources, a place of isolation, not a lot of people. What I find interesting is all throughout the Bible, the wilderness is a place of learning, of preparation, or even a place where somebody experiences the real God. And that's what happens in the wilderness for Moses. Jacob saw a stairway to heaven in the wilderness. Elijah heard a still small voice. John the Baptist preached repentance in the wilderness. Jesus himself was found in the wilderness for 40 days fasting. Paul searched over the scriptures in the wilderness, all coming into a better, more real relationship with God, yet through isolation, through difficulty in the wilderness. Exodus 2, verse 15b. We're going to start there. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. The shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and saved them and watered their flock. When they came home to their father Reuel, he said, "How is it that you have come home so soon today?" They said, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds and even drew water for us." and watered the flock. He said to his daughters, "Then where is he? Why have you left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread." And Moses was content to dwell with the man. And he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah. She gave birth to a son, and he called his name Gershom. For he said, "I have been a sojourner in a foreign land." This is a story or an explanation of Moses' experience in the wilderness. But Moses' experience in the wilderness was so much deeper. I've spent really the last couple weeks in Exodus chapter 2, never imagining starting this series to be so really amazed by Exodus 2. I've read it several times in my life. But now, over the last couple weeks, there's so many theological, just incredible concepts that just jump out of these pages, where it's become one of my favorite chapters in the Bible. Because Moses, and seeing what he experiences, he desperately wanted the call of God. Yet, it took God preparing Moses in the wilderness for him to accomplish the purpose of God in his life. The wilderness is a place of preparation. God was preparing. 40 years of preparation. But ultimately, the purpose of God was exactly what Moses sought after, desired at age 40, and would finally accomplish it or realize it at age 80. There's three ways, God prepared Moses in the wilderness. The first was his living situation. Moses had to begin to learn how to survive in the wilderness. He grew up in Pharaoh's household. Whatever he wanted, he got. Whatever he asked for, he would receive. If he needed food, if he was hungry, if he was thirsty, he needed new clothing, he needed new shoes, he needed this or that. It was all at his accessibility. He could get whatever he needed. But now, in the wilderness, he was by himself. He was alone, had given up all of the things that he sought, or all the things that made his life easy. He was if you will, a golden spoon or silver spoon. Now he had no spoon at all. He had to learn how to survive, find water, and navigate in the wilderness. What I love about God's preparation is God was preparing him to help him learn all these attributes and these characteristics that he would eventually use to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt and into the wilderness, where he would direct them towards water. He would direct them towards safety. He would direct and lead and guide them to be able to navigate the wilderness. Moses had grown up in a palace, but now he was in the middle of nowhere, fully relying on God. God had begun to prepare him for his purpose. Moses' purpose was to lead God's chosen people, the Hebrews, out of Egypt. And yet it took 40 years of preparation. Moses' living situation began to prepare him. Moses was going through a bit of an identity crisis. Can I show it to you? Verse 19. They, being the daughters of Reuel, or Jethro, also known as Jethro, they said in verse 19, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hands of the shepherds." An Egyptian, yet he wasn't an Egyptian. He was a Hebrew. They viewed him. So did he look like one? Did he talk like one? Did he dress like one? Did he walk like, no, I won't go there. Walk like an Egyptian, right? Now, he looked the part, but yet he was cast out by the Hebrews. He was on the run from the Egyptians. Now he was in a place where he would have an identity crisis. I believe in the wilderness, many of us, if not all of us, experience an identity crisis. Who am I? What is my purpose? God, are you actually going to do something? This is not good. I'm by myself, out in the middle of nowhere with no resources, no abilities, no skills, and now who am I anyways? I find that's in the perfect place for God to begin to work. An identity crisis is exactly what Moses was going through. His dress, his haircut, the way he talked, maybe even the way he walked. I'll tell you this quarantine time has created a bit of identity crisis for me. You're like, really? Yeah. Yeah, I tend to identify with the church, not preaching, not through a screen, but gathering together. I love the church. I love gathering with the church. I eat, breathe, sleep, dream about the church. I dream about some things that God's gonna do. I dream about things that we could do to reach this community, that community, abilities. We could change this, do this. My brain is always on overdrive. In this time of quarantine or this time of isolation or this time of wilderness has created a bit of an identity crisis for me. I just felt God whispering in my heart, and I believe it can encourage you today. God just whispers, your identity's not in what you do. Your identity's in me. Your identity's in me. Your identity's in who I've made you to be. Your identity is built on Jesus Christ. Maybe that can encourage you this morning. It's not in your abilities, your attributes, your accomplishments, your failures, anything you can do on your own. Your ability is built in, and your identity is built in Jesus Christ. And Moses had to realize that in the time of preparation, his identity was built on God. His abilities were built on God. His accomplishments, his purpose, his plan, all was built on God, preparing his heart, preparing his mind, preparing all of his gifting for the purpose and the plan of God. And he did that first through his living situation. The second is God prepared Moses through his family situation. Moses had just been abandoned by his Hebrew family. He's given up his Egyptian family who's really trying to kill him, as Exodus 2 says. All alone in the wilderness, wondering, how am I going to accomplish God's purpose in my life now? Guess it's kind of over. What I love about Exodus 2, it's a real love story. Like, really? Yeah, like a real damsel in distress moment. Moses becomes the hero, saves the girl, gets the girl, marries the girl, has kids, and everybody lives happily, I guess, kind of after, right? I can prove it to you. Look, Exodus 2 describes Moses sitting at a well. Verse 16 says, the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. They came and drew water. So he sees these 7 beautiful women. He's in the wilderness. There's not other women, so they got to be beautiful, right? Coming up, and he's like, okay. And all of a sudden, the bad guys, the shepherds, the ones that would kind of abuse and get rid of the ladies, what would happen is the women would fill the troughs with water, and then the shepherds would jump in and run off the ladies, and then their sheep would be able to drink first. I got to imagine almost even stealing some of their sheep. But on this day, it was different. There was a hero. There was a man that stepped in, as he's described in Exodus 2. And this time the shepherds came to really run off the women. And verse 17 says the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and saved them. So Moses stepped in and said, guys, what are we doing? Get out of here. They did this. Let them. Ran off these shepherds. Big bad shepherds ran off easy. Moses was the hero for these 7 ladies. Then he wasn't just the hero. He said, ladies, I got this. And did the work. He had to like flex or something as he was feeding and watering the sheep. And then the story continues. The ladies head home. Their father's like, what are you home so early? You got to imagine that interaction with the shepherds and the women was a daily or a common occurrence that they continued to fight. But today was different. Moses had stepped in. And they described to their father, verse 19, they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock. Verse 20 said, he said to his daughters, then where is he? I love his response here. Why have you left the man? Call him that he may eat. There is a guy in the wilderness. There's not a lot of options out here. You got a chance to meet a guy that stepped up and saved you. We got to go get him. So we got to imagine sending back the 7 ladies, say, go find this guy and bring him home. And at that moment, he meets Zipporah, and they are married and have a child named Gershom. Interesting name, but we'll go with it, right? What a love story. What a real true damsel in distress moment. But at this moment, Moses' life was changed. He now had a family of his own. He had a child. Life-changing moments. They began to shape you. They began to change your mindset, your priorities, maybe even your passions a little bit. And at that moment, Moses' life was changed forever, having a child and being married. What's interesting is Reuel, his father-in-law. Reuel means friend of God. He was described as a priest of the Midianites. The Midianites are descendants of Abraham, like nephews. And maybe Reuel could have begun to shape Moses in understanding who God is, the real God, the one true God. Later in Exodus, Reuel, or he's called Jethro, is described as helping Moses develop leadership skills or dividing in leadership skills. Reuel had begun to step in as a great father-like figure when the families of this world, he stepped in, not blood, but he stepped in to help, to encourage, but also to train. Where just a few verses later, Moses would experience the one true God in a burning bush and be thrust into the purpose of God. Jethro was, or Reuel was, a part of that plan, that family situation. About 14 years ago, my wife and I moved to Florida, just south of Daytona Beach, a little town called Edgewater, New Smyrna Beach. It's a beautiful little town. I like the weather in Florida way better than I like the weather in Michigan, especially in February, right? Well, my wife and I moved there not knowing anyone, had really no friends, no church, no support structure. It really was a bit of a wilderness moment for us. We bought a house, and it was just really the two of us. Remember going the first Sunday trying to church out. Just didn't feel like it was right for us. And that week, we're wondering, all right, God, what do you have for us? God began to steer people in our lives. God began to put different people. I remember meeting a woman, one of our neighbors, and she said, hey, you should try that church. You guys are young. You'd like it. And we began to try this church. The first day, it was a click. I could give you all these details. You wouldn't believe them. How we began to see God go before us and put people on our path. Ones that would ultimately help begin to shape and change our lives forever. Ones that went from strangers to friends to family. At that church, there was a youth pastor named Kevin, his wife Lori. My wife and I became really good friends with them. It's amazing. God began to place them in our lives. We'd play golf together. We'd play games, go out to eat as family or as friends that eventually becoming family. All of a sudden, Kevin says, hey, maybe we could start discipling and talking through what God has for you in your life. And all of a sudden, God began to shape in my life of his plan and his purpose. I believe God placed me in Florida to prepare me for this today. I can confidently say I wouldn't be standing here today without Kevin and Lori in my life. God placed them in the time of preparation to help shape me for the purpose I have today. I'll be eternally grateful to both of them and so many others down in Florida that God placed in my path. Not necessarily blood family, but they became family. And I believe God is placing people in your life to help shape you, nurture you, prepare you for his purpose, even in this time of quarantine. Well, I can't see them face to face. Yeah, but maybe a screen or a drive-by from some distance. God is placing people in your path. Let him prepare you. First way God prepared Moses was in his living situation. The second was in his family situation. The third was in his work situation. Exodus 3:1 tells of what job or occupation Moses was given. Exodus 3:1 says, now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro. Moses was now you guessed it, a shepherd. What's interesting is in Genesis 46, verse 34, the Egyptians describe shepherds as detestable, as lowly, as gross, as unclean. Why would the son or the grandson of Pharaoh become a shepherd? That's gross. He would have never gained these abilities. He would never have gained this mindset. He would never have gained this perspective as a son of Pharaoh. Yet, when he became a shepherd, he began to understand how to deal with sheep that would wander, sheep that were skittish, sheep that would fight with one another. Those sound like similar characteristics, right, of the children of Israel, where Moses was described in Psalm 77 and 78 as a shepherd, using the skills and abilities in the journey of leading God's people. God was working. God was preparing. What a great understanding. Moses never would have thought, I'm using these abilities to deal with two sheep that are fighting. No, yet just a few years later, he'd deal with two sheep of God that were fighting over certain things and fighting over food and arguing over leadership. You got to put Moses in that position going, God, what am I doing? How do I deal with these people? Just like you dealt with those sheep. Just when I was preparing you all those years ago. It's amazing how Moses was the most qualified man on the entire earth. Literally, the most qualified man on the entire earth to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. He was Egyptian enough to confront the Egyptians and Pharaoh, and he was Hebrew enough to love the Hebrews. God was preparing in the wilderness. He was teaching in lesson form and application. Preparation does take patience. Man, that 40 years was heavy, was difficult, was tough. Not something I'd be like, man, I've had enough, God. I don't want any more. You're preparing me. No, the purpose took patience. And God was preparing. What I find interesting is James 1 says the same thing to us. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. When you find yourself in the wilderness, when you find yourself in isolation, when you find yourself alone, God is preparing you for your purpose. I don't know what your purpose is this morning, but I can confidently say God is in the preparation mode. God is in the preparation mood. God is preparing right now. He's preparing you for his purpose. He's shaping you. He's directing you. I don't know what you do as a job, but God may be using those abilities to be able to use for his glory, for his honor. For someone that maybe you never experience, you never have an interaction with, God steps in and says, hey, remember how I brought you from point A to point B? I was preparing you. If you missed it all this morning, I need you to hear this. God is a preparer. I believe God has a purpose for you. What's interesting is the number 40 throughout the Bible is an important number. Numbers are really cool. There's some great meaning. We should do a full study of that. We did a little bit in our men's group on one of the Wednesday evenings talking about important numbers. The number 40 is used for testing or trial or preparation. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness. He would then lead the children of Israel for 40 years. Noah was in the ark, for 40 days? And why, it wasn't, he was in there longer, but it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness, fasting and preparing to be thrust into his ministry. 40 years was an important number, but an important preparation time. I don't know how long you've been in preparation. You say, man, this wilderness stuff is terrible. I understand. It's hurtful. It's hard. It's difficult. You feel alone. You feel like no one supports you. You feel like you have no future, much like Moses felt in Exodus 2. God was at work. Oh, man, I wish I could clearly articulate that better. And I wish that I could look you eye to eye, face to face. God was at work. Man, when we see, when God makes all things work together for those who good are called upon his purpose. I'll get that out. God was at work in Exodus 2, and God is at work in your life today. I can confidently say that. God is at work. There's no questions about it. There's no I thinks. There's no I'm not sures. I can say without a shadow of doubt, God is at work. We see this in Exodus 3. Look at, we see the preparation turn into purpose in a heartbeat, and it gets exciting, but then God confirms it. Exodus 3. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness, came to Horeb, the mountain of God. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. But the Lord saw that he turned aside to see. God called him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. Love that. That's 3 of my favorite words in the entire Bible. Here I am. Much like Isaiah responded to the call of God in his life. Here I am. Be ready for the call of God in your life. Hands up saying, here I am. Then he said, do not come near. Take off your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look. Then the Lord said, I have seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, And I've heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings. And I've come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me. And I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. There's a purpose. It was all in preparation for the purpose. But God doubles down. This is great. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go down to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? I'm not qualified, God. I can't do this. You got to find somebody else. But God's response is incredible. God says to him, but I will be with you. And this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have been brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, they ask, what is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. It was all in preparation for the purpose God placed in his life. Yes, the wilderness is difficult. The wilderness is hard. You feel alone. You feel like you have no purpose. You lose your identity in the wilderness. I'll say this. God was at work shaping, molding Moses for the purpose in his life, and he's doing the same thing for you. He's doing the same thing for me. God is at work in the wilderness. What I love is we have a God that's a God of the hills and the valleys, the highs and the lows of life. The psalmist says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You're with me. You will never leave me nor forsake me. He says it to Moses, and he says it to you. He says it to me. That's in the wilderness and not. You're not alone in the wilderness. He walked in preparation and in purpose. So many times, we're like, God, I'm ready for your purpose. I'm ready to run. Well, he's like, no, you're just a little baby. Learn to crawl. Learn to walk. Learn to trust me. Learn to hear my voice. Learn to be able to discern the calling of God in your life. And at that moment, when God deems you are ready, his purpose is worth the wilderness. Man, if I could convince one person today, I'd be enough. Man, the wilderness may not just be this time of quarantine. It may be years. This just may be cemented in further. You begin to question who God is, what his plan is, what his work is. His purpose is worth the wilderness. Man, I am sent me. I believe God speaking this morning. Man, like I said, I wish I could see you because I want to confidently preach God's word. Say, you know what? The I am is clear. He's with you. But I say it through a TV screen. I say it through a computer. I say it through a phone. You have a purpose, and the I am is preparing you for it. I wouldn't be doing this if I did. If I didn't believe it. I'd be wasting my time. I'd be getting up and say, hey, you know what? There's no purpose. There's no plan. No, I believe it. I declare it. I yell it from the rooftops. God is at work, and he's preparing you for the plan in your life. I believe it for me. With all that I have. With all that I am. Trust God in the preparation. see what he's teaching you in the wilderness. It'd be amazing to look back and go, wow, I never saw God was working. Yet he was working. He was preparing me for my purpose. Would you pray with me? God, I come to you. I lift you up. I honor you. I praise you. God, thank you for this morning. Thank you for your word. Thank you for the ability to be able to preach it. Thank you for the ability to be able to see how you were preparing Moses. At times, the wilderness is a place you just feel like giving up. God, I know someone right now feels like they want to give up. Watching, listening. God, I ask that you be real right now. Help them to realize you are with them, not just in your purpose, but in the wilderness as well. You are preparing. Thank you for letting us see the lessons in the wilderness of Moses, but help us to realize you're teaching us lessons right now. God, thank you. Thank you for having patience with a hard-headed kid. Ran away from your purpose. Thank you for having patience with us. God, I love you. I praise you. I honor you. In Jesus' wonderful name, amen. Thanks for gathering with us this morning. Hope you were blessed and challenged by that message. I could keep preaching for hours. Exodus 2 is just amazing. I encourage you to read along with us as we continue in this series. Read chapter 2 and chapter 3. They just make the story of Moses come alive. But I always want to let you know, if we can pray for you, encourage you, whatever we can do, you let us know. There's a moderator right on what you're watching. Comment. You can shoot the church an email. If I can pray for you, do anything, you let me know. Do want to tell you I love you. I miss you. Looking forward to next Sunday being able to see you through a car window. That's exciting. Hopefully over the next few weeks we'll be working through what we can and cannot do. But until then, stay safe. I miss you. I love you. Have a wonderful day. Bye now.